SEPS Strategic Plan. Proofs of concept. As part of the SEPS Strategic Plan, proofs of concept were developed to demonstrate workflows that will be possible if the strategic plan is implemented. The proofs of concept are not comprehensive and are intended to be demonstrations of some potential workflows and tools. The tools used were not selected as the only solutions possible, but to illustrate what type of an ecosystem could develop in the next version of SEPS once a services-oriented architecture is enabled. Proof of concept number 2, decoupled data, access level, and web services. Tables will be separated from SEPS application, controlled access to specific data points for viewing, and data that can be edited with proper access levels. Data such as the 1691 equipment data and the UFCB and other tables that are commonly used in SEPS will be put on max.gov server and made accessible through web services. Once this data is on max.gov, the data will be made available to SEPS and other applications. The amount of data just in these tables, if you start counting the number of data points that, for example, the 1691 has 2,050 pieces of equipment with about 55 attributes per piece of equipment, meaning a total of over 112,000 data points. If you start multiplying this out over the number of rooms, the number of spaces in SEPS of 808, and the SEPS unique room types in MHS and VA of 6,890, it literally becomes infinite variations of data. This data is constantly changing as it is updated quarterly and yearly. Therefore, a services-oriented architecture approach and web services allows the data to live on and to be accessed and updated in a more consistent way. For example, SEPS data such as rooms and equipment, the room code EXRG4 for the exam adult screening room, and the JSN M7905 for the oximeter pulse, is just one piece of data, but imagine these coming out of max.gov and being published as web services. Web services then allows you to do things like view the data. So for example, if we want only the public to view certain pieces of data, the red box on the left shows the type of data that is already published as PDFs, but now coming out as a service from max.gov. You would still be able to pull the data out as tables, but also be able to use it in other applications. At the same time, there's certain data within the equipment information that is not accessible to the public. So for example, actual pricing of a specific manufacturer piece of equipment, manufacturer A, B, and C might all have pulse oximeters that have slightly different specifications and different cost. The mean price cost is then pulled into the public data, but the actual manufacturer specific information is not identified who is manufacturing type number A. At the same time, if you put it into a services-oriented architecture approach, because you secure the data at the user access level, manufacturer A, for example, could log in and decide to update the specification of that oximeter pulse. This makes it a much more sustainable and scalable way of managing this complex data by eventually asking manufacturers to insert their data or even to use web services and publish updates to their specifications rather than having an analysis that would need to be done to go out and canvass the industry for the 2,000 something pieces of equipment and the associated attributes. At the same time, the publicly accessible data that is used inside SEPS, plus is also published online, is more accessible. So for example, in this particular case, the pulse oximeter, for some reason, this is actual SEPS data, we notice that it has medical gases associated with it, miscellaneous gases of liquid nitrogen, etc. This doesn't seem right to me, but I'm not an expert in this particular piece of equipment. But if I knew and I was aware that this was actually an error, I could actually flag that and make it easier to update in the future. This data that is currently published as a null standard 1691, made accessible through web services on max.gov, will open a whole new way to interact with data, to maintain it, and update it over time. The end result will be that we will have machine-readable data that makes updating and managing it more efficient. The SEPS ecosystem becomes much more scalable since this data is in a format that, for example, the manufacturer can update, and the accuracy and timeliness of data actually could improve too. So instead of having updates happening quarterly, for example, we might have new equipment that comes online that is made accessible immediately. This is the end of the proof of concept slides for proof of concept number 2, decoupled data. So here's the entire SEPS database in a application that runs on the desktop. It's basically a database. Here's the same oximeter pulse. In this case, I've logged in with access privileges so I can actually edit the data. So if I say, well, this medical gas really should not be here, we should actually delete it and make it a null value because there is no medical gas required for this oximeter. That's one simple example of how data can be updated. Size and width and all that is basically just a simple input form that can look like this or have a more simple input. And this has all the other equipment in SEPS, so I could literally search throughout all the different SEPS 1691 data like this, or even look at it in a format that might be on an iPad. Here's the exact same data now on an iPad. What I showed you earlier could have been live connected to the internet, or on the iPad it could be live connected as well directly into max.gov if we publish it as a service. Since this is public data anyway, maybe I can access it as read-only. Or even if I have the right access level here as well, I can also start going in and editing directly on the iPad. We've found that giving access to information like this to end users, to criteria managers, for example, or to the healthcare facility, if we're searching for what do we call this type of pulse oximeter, so we're all on the same page, which actually right now is not really easily accessible. You'd have to go and find the PDF or log into SEPS. But as we all know, these mobile applications and tablets make it very easy to start accessing information. This is just one small example of what web service enabling the SEPS data could result in as part of this decoupled data access level and web services proof of concept.